All right, and welcome to the HODL review. We're here on the chain. What's up, Chip? I don't think the notifications are working. I don't think any messaging is getting out there. I don't know what's going on. Are you seeing me here on the stream? Streaming. There we go. I don't know what happened. I think notifications were being held up. Something happened with the stream, but it should be solid right now. We should be moving forward. I put let's see, hopefully a few people will bounce into the stream and we'll get things moving forward here. Um, there's, what does that say? Norway's. I got to pull this up in front of me as people start bouncing in. So this is really good. What's up, Jerry Hall? Jerry is here. Good to see you. For sure. Yeah, we got a lot of people watching the interview that dropped. We're gonna have to figure this out. I don't want to live stream over the interviews that we're dropping Saturday morning, so we might have to flip-flop exactly how we're doing this. So we want to make sure this is all the way it needs to be and orchestrated the way it needs to be because we got a ton of stuff to cover this morning. Normally I'd be streaming at 8. I was trying this 9 a.m. slot. I think I'm going back to the 8 o'clock slot. That way we can figure out how we work this out, how we work out the details. So anyhow, for those that are bouncing into the room right now, we definitely have a lot to cover this morning. So if we don't get a few more people in here, then that's their loss. So what? Doesn't matter to me, because you guys are going to get the benefit of what we're going to talk about this morning. So here we go. Now, what we want to focus in on really is the subject matter at hand. So let me throw out a few thoughts. Let's get some comments from you guys. Let's see exactly what you guys think about this subject. And it's going to be an interesting, very dynamic conversation. So here's some food for thought. Let's start this off. Cryptocurrency to the moon and beyond. What exactly does that mean? What is the impetus? What is going to impact digital currency, digital asset, cryptocurrency to actually take its next step forward? What is going to send it back, rapidly, moving towards these moon numbers that many have talked about and many anticipate. So we need to focus in on, and on today's conversation, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to focus in on the central bank's digital currency that they're getting ready to roll out at a rapid pace. Now, we also have to identify what's going on from a global economic crisis right now. Let's call it the political economic crisis of 2020, because much of this has been politically derived, and it has there's a much bigger battle going on politically, which we've alluded to multiple times. It's an economic battle and it's a political battle, and it's causing significant tension, which will have a ramification that is so far reaching, we haven't even begun to see the beginning of it yet. Now, on the other side of this calamity is the digital asset space, the digital currency, digital asset. So we have, France rolling out central bank digital currencies. We have England that's extremely serious now about central bank digital currencies. We have Germany talking about central bank digital currencies. We have China trying to push forward and be on the forefront of central bank digital currencies. And we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about the impact, the negative impact that the Chinese Communist government has had on a global economy, and they will have to pay significantly. There's a steep price to pay for the deception of this Chinese government in terms of this current economic crisis that led to this current economic crisis. And now what we're going to be seeing is a battle of the wills to see who is going to roll out their central bank digital currency first. Now, is it going to be China with this potential yuan? Is it going to be France? Is it going to be England? Is it possible that there's going to be a digital euro? Or is the US, the Fed, somehow going to roll out with some form of a digital currency while the US is really lagging significantly behind in this thought process, in this concept? We also see from a political perspective, much of what's happening in the U.S. has been distorted over the past couple years towards fictitious arguments. But one thing that is certain, we don't want this Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi digital destructive dollar that they tried to propose in this bailout. We don't want to jump into anything out of fear. We don't want to have the country jump into something that is going to put us at a net negative. Something that is cloaked in deception, as we've seen the same exact deception coming out of the Chinese government with their cover-ups. So we have to be extremely cognizant. We have to educate ourselves to the fullest ability. You have to do your own research. You have to spend time going through a lot of these things and really identifying exactly what each element means and trying to start connecting these pieces. Don't take anyone's word for it. Don't listen to the mainstream media because they have an agenda. You have to start piecing all of these individual puzzle pieces together on your own to really figure this message out. So Jerry Hall, Ken Luna, we'll figure that out. Let's talk about this in a while. So there's multiple aspects of this discussion that we have to really approach. Now, number one, we want to look at this when moon scenario. So when moon, what is that? What exactly does that mean? I don't think anybody really has a direct idea. However, there are multiple facts on the ground right now, as we had talked about. With the one side, you're starting to see the destruction of a global economy, and it's not unique to one country. It's all countries around the world. What I find the most interesting out of this entire subject matter, out of this entire debate, is the fact that this issue began in China. It was covered up in China. The physicians that were monitoring this were eliminated. Political discourse was completely silenced. And then, as this new version of a flu began to spread globally, the narratives began to shift. And as one individual out there, reminded us a number of years ago, you don't want to waste a good crisis. And here we have an epidemic, so to speak, crisis that was thrust upon us. The question can still be debated as to whether or not the modeling is accurate. You have to go back and you have to look at the individuals that behind the modeling and see where they come from an ideological perspective, to then verify whether or not their information is twisted, if it's accurate, or if it has a political agenda. And then you have to look at the other elements of this. So there's so many elements of this, again, from a health perspective, from an economic perspective, and from a political perspective, as we're beginning to see right now. And the reason why all of this is relevant is because they're utilizing fear as a methodology to destroy a global economy. Now, you would have to say, okay, why is that so bad? Because they're trying to save people's lives. But then the follow-up question to that is, are they? Are they really attempting to save people's lives, or are they trying to move the entire world into a specific agenda narrative that they've already pre-written? And so if you look at it from that aspect, and the fact that there's probably a much greater political battle that's taking place externally, a much greater economic battle that's taking place externally, things that we'll never see. You're seeing countries around the world that are arresting people and putting people in jail if they dare step outside of their house. So now they've completely taken away the individual freedoms, the individual rights for that person to move about in their country, in their town, on their own, with free will. Now there's major issues with that, because not only are they blockading and imprisoning and falsely imprisoning people into their homes, they're also robbing people of their wealth through the destructive nature of what they've thrust upon us by shutting down the entire global economy. So now you have to rationalize this, and you have to take all of this into consideration, because this is a very important time that we're finding ourselves in here globally. Now, what I find most interesting and most pressing is that the political class, and if you focus in on the U.S. at least, Congress, Senate, average salaries for a congressional representative is about $175,000 a year. The Senate, probably around $200,000 a year. Their incomes haven't been stopped. Now you have a lot of people out here that are directly impacted by the economic shutdown in the United States, as they are in many parts of the world. Yet the political class are still getting their payments. And that is extremely problematic from multiple perspectives, mainly because if they're still getting paid, they're not suffering the same consequence as everybody else is going to suffer. So that has major ramifications, that they've now elevated themselves into a different class. That means that they're better than you. That means that they're controlling and dictating your lives, but yet they're not suffering the exact same consequence. Now, the reason why all this is so critical is because at the exact same period of time, we're beginning to see, from an economic perspective, we're also, so well, let's take a step back. These tensions that we're beginning to see more on a global scale, more on a political scale. We've seen a lot of chess pieces being moved around. We see chess pieces moving around in terms of the U.S., in terms of the Trump administration. We see chess pieces moving around over in England. And if you see what's going on over in England with Brexit, so that was moving forward at a rapid clip. The economy in the United States was moving forward at a rapid clip. You're starting to see some breakaway movements in other countries in Australia. You started to see some big tensions rising up in China to break away from the communist control. You began to see some big tensions over in Russia, and as a direct result, Putin had them pass certain legislation that would allow him to stay in power until 2036. And so you have a lot of interesting dynamics at play. So all these pieces are moving rapidly. Now they have a political aspect, they have an economic aspect. Now in this battle, we're beginning to see the collateral damage of what's happening economically. Now it's interesting. I watched an interesting video this morning, and talking about the numbers of what we're seeing with this with this issue. Part of it is the modeling is inaccurate, giving us wrong numbers. The other part of it is that their statistics are inaccurate based on the percentage of people that are succumbing to this versus those that have it, because they haven't tested everybody. There's not enough statistics. But what they have identified, many of the researchers, is that this is another version of the flu, And so the numbers are being skewed. And instead of, if you take a step back to a year ago, where the flu numbers, you had 650,000 people died last year from the flu, but yet everyone said, oh, it's the flu, wash your hands, take some medicine, go get a flu vaccine, you'll be okay, don't worry about it. Yet 650,000 people globally died from it. Now you fast forward, instead of saying, hey, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out, now they're hyper sensitive and hyper focused on the fear mongering of what the ramification of this is, and it's a completely adjusted and changed narrative. We talked a little bit about yesterday about demophrenia, which is the schizophrenic nature of a democracy, which, as I was talking about with DNI and DNI's theories, uses a lot of that incrementalism, but incrementally we're subjected to a decrease in freedoms. This is a huge leap into that direction, and it's a matter of what the people are willing to do. Are they willing to sit back and allow their freedoms to be infringed on and allow their freedoms to be stolen from them? That is the biggest question. Now, from an economic perspective, from a crypto perspective, what does all of this mean? Because as our eyes are turned, as many people are now focused into survival mode because of what, and think about everyone now, we're just collateral damage to this bigger agenda. But while we're doing this, you have movement from governments, you have movement from central banks that are moving in a direction to try to normalize digital asset and cryptocurrency. I'm not saying that one thing came before the other, but now you're seeing a faster and faster ramp up. Now, one of the purposes of this when moon argument, the when moon is also, when are we going to see some form of a mass adoption or mass movement into this digital asset cryptocurrency space? And I think that also bears a lot of significance. So when moon has a lot of different meanings from that perspective. More utility, more adoption, more mainstream recognition, propelling it. When moon in society? When is this going to become a normalized method of transaction? And last night, Dee and I talked about that in depth, about what that movement could look like, what that movement may, you may not want it to look like. So at some point, there also has to be a direction and a directing of the narrative. So that is, all interesting. Now what we have to look at are actually, some of the facts on the ground, some of the conversations that are going on a daily basis that can actually impact, everything that we're talking about. They can impact this when moon scenario, impact when moon from a perspective of, are we going to begin to see more rapid adoption? Are we going to see more mainstream recognition of the digital currency space, of this crypto space? So let's take a look at some articles that have been appearing over this past week, because this kind of sets the tone and the theme for this narrative. So with all this chaos that we just explained, that we're all living through right now, going on, and we're starting to see, because coming out of this economy is going to be interesting. I believe that in the US, if they turn the economy back on, we're going to see a huge boost back up. But while that's happening, you still have all the other issues that existed before all of this happened. So you still have the debt crisis. Countries all around the world have a debt issue. Are they going to have some sort of a debt holiday, a debt jubilee, where all debts are erased? Are we at that point where governments are also looking at, is this also a methodology, as the governments are butting heads right now, globally and internally, we see these power struggles, are they also looking at this debt crisis? How can they absolve and get rid of a debt crisis? And where do these different countries, factor in this overall battle? Where does China factor in now that they're seeing massive, massive numbers of factories that are going to be fleeing China when one of their primary sources of revenue is employing their citizenry, in these factories? We see Japan already. There were some interesting articles this week where Japan is actually giving a large sum of money for their factories to leave China. Japan, why are they there to begin with? So now they're going to be leaving. Samsung pulled all of its mobile divisions out of China about a year ago. The United States has been pushing to see a lot of these factories leave China on a rapid basis. All of these things are really interesting because it's all happening simultaneously while this thing that's impacting us right now rolled out that caused a complete shutdown. Also, we have to look at there's a lot of conversation about from this green movement and this Green New Deal that wanted to shut down air traffic, wanted to shut down vehicle traffic. Now, what are we seeing on a global scale? This is interesting, and it's an important, part of the conversation is that we have a huge, huge decrease in air traffic. Although if you look at the air traffic maps in the U.S., a lot of planes are still flying because the airlines don't want to lose their space in their time slots. So they're still flying. There's still a lot of air traffic and they're empty. But yet we're starting to see a lot of international air traffic decrease exponentially. The utility of vehicles on the roads has decreased exponentially. So what aspect does that organization have in fomenting the fears? Where did they fit into the narrative, and how many of these individuals that created the modeling are part of that organization and that party globally that want to push forward a false agenda under a false narrative? So all of those factors are critical, again, as we're moving forward, trying to identify exactly how does crypto now factor into the space. How can cryptocurrency and these central bank digital currencies actually help absolve the world of this debt crisis? And I think that's something we all have to figure out. We all have to look at. We can't continuously be sheeple being led by the talking heads on TV that, from my experience, the majority of them are clueless. They don't know any more than any of us. They might have access to additional individuals or potentially additional research that they've done that we might not have done yet. But the majority of them are going to speak from an agenda point of view. The majority of them aren't really as intelligent as the TV tries to make them appear, especially those that are on the media, especially those talking heads that you listen to on a daily basis, fermenting their opinions. Again, those are opinions coming from their brain that isn't, wrapped in some, extra intelligence. They don't have any extra, megs, plugged into their brain that's giving them some, some other thought process. So you have to really, take that into consideration. So let me take a sideline. I'm going to start sharing some of these articles in here. We're going to walk down this path in a second. Before I do that, though, let me spend a few seconds here, just recognizing some of the questions in this. In the chat here, we've blasted this out a little bit. I've got DNI. So this is probably the most pressing question of them all, because in the post-apocalyptic world, there's only one lemon tree. There's only one left. One lemon tree that we can breed into multiple lemon trees. And DNI, this is it. I am the guardian of the lemon tree. So all right, so let's go up. And I did watch another interesting video this morning talking about what's going on over in India and some of the things they eat in India, which is also very interesting, boosting their immunity with turmeric, staying healthy on the inside is really really important. So there's a lot that goes along with that. Let's see. I like Norway's XRP 285 because he's been pushing for a date, as Jerry Hall has also been wanting to know when moon. Kien Luna, we're not going to tell you the exact date, Jerry. But but I like this here. Norway moon in 2022, not one day before. Maybe what is that? 5 USD in 2020 for XRP? I don't know. Carl Lewis, please elaborate on Jerry's question, when moon? All right, let's keep going. Let's move on. I just want to appreciate everybody for bouncing in here. Some new faces that I haven't seen in the chat before. Some relatively new faces like Wen Mullet has been coming in regularly now into our chats. I see Cryptopolis is in here. Great to have Cryptopolis here. Obviously, you guys know Chip. You guys know Jerry Hall. You guys know Digital Nomad Investor. All of these guys. We have a lot of great contribution here on this channel. I also see Ruben Zuniga. I haven't seen you in here before. Really great to have you in here. Great comments as well. But you did have a question here, and it's interesting. Playing devil's advocate. What good is crypto? What good is crypto without fiat and central banks? Do you really think will let crypto coexist? So that's interesting, and let's kind of dig into that question a little bit. Let's go into, as we start going through some of these articles, we want to try to figure this out. I think will be interesting. So let's shift over here. Let's see. Hang on. Let's see how we can shift and make the transition. There you go. Look at that. It's easy shift. And now you guys can see this behind me. We're going to look at what's going on. Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank. We don't want to talk about Deutsche Bank, but let's go to the article. Let's see what we got over here. All right. So the reason why I brought this article up was actually to show you these cool ads that I should be blocking. But this was on bitcoinist.com, an opinion piece. It's an opinion piece. We're going to dig down and look at some other things, but I like some of the questions that they brought up in this article, so it's important to look at it. We're going to move on. We're not going to sit here and read the article. That's not what we do here. But central bank digital currencies may arrive within 3 years. Does he actually have a reason? Well, the reason is because we've got this comment right here. He was very nice enough to pull out this little section here, but Deutsche Bank analyst Marianne Labor said that the major central banks that recently formed a think tank to explore digital currencies might take concrete actions within 3 years. Now, why do they say that, and why are they projecting 3 years? Banks move slowly, but we also want to identify that by the time they start talking about it, they've already been doing it. Banks aren't going to come out and allude to doing something if they haven't already tested it, if they haven't already figured all the different aspects of it out. Central banks aren't going to make some huge movement without figuring it out. But it's interesting. The global pandemic is accelerating the process. So is it coincidental timing? Think about debt crisis. Think about political struggles. Think about the tension between freedom, countries that support freedoms, democracies, those that support communism and totalitarianism, and the power struggles that always exist. Think about the power struggles in China politically, the tension between the communist political infrastructure and a capitalist economy. They don't work. They always will butt heads with each other. The communist political system doesn't allow and doesn't want enough freedoms, and they'll always find a methodology to try to silence the capitalist. So you have the billionaire in China that was extremely outspoken that disappeared for like 3 weeks. Supposedly, he was causing too much tension and dissension to this communist government, but he disappeared. Reporters disappear, etc., etc. We just talked about what's going on over in Russia. Consolidation of totalitarian political power over freedom. So you have to understand that aspect of it as we begin to move into what these central banks are also attempting to do in order to they're in business to make money. We know that banks wouldn't exist if it wasn't for them having a cut in the whole process. People need to fund projects, business, real estate, whether you're investing or purchasing vehicles, schooling, because that's a whole nother conversation as to why school, college, university has skyrocketed, mainly because of the availability of the funds. So we have a lot of those issues. But anyhow, people need the banking infrastructure to make this stuff happen. Now, with all of this, it's interesting because we're beginning to see this movement and this conversation into now central banks that for the past number of years, they've been identifying this as an issue. They've been looking at the dynamics. They're looking at Bitcoin, the success of Bitcoin. They're not fools. They understand the dynamics here of of what of what this digital asset space means, this new asset class. They understand it, and they're finding ways now to incorporate it and take some form of control over it, so that they get their piece of it. Whether that's incorporating the full line of digital currencies or the top 10, whatever it might be, into their portfolios, to then also begin to hold those digital currencies for individuals, for the people that are banking with them, give them more of a safety net when they hold their cryptocurrency. Having their own general purpose digital currency, which is what we're seeing here. General purpose, what does that mean? What are they alluding to? This general purpose, interesting. And so this is, again, they were talking in front of the Reuters that the central banks recently formed a group of trial CBDCs. So here we have them globally communicating. They're talking to each other. They're not going to do this individually. So here you go. You have the European Central Bank. This is why this is such a great article. This guy did some really solid research, and pulling up some ideas. But again, you look at all the different pieces that are happening from a central bank digital currency adoption. European Central Bank, Central Bank of Canada, England, Japan, Switzerland, Sweden. They have a think tank to create CBDCs. So it's called the Bank for International Settlement, BIS. The Bank of International Settlement, BIS, also joined their initiative, joined this think tank. So it's interesting. It's important. Look at the percentage. Look at this. This is the number, the population. They represent a significant part of the world's population. So this movement, this concept, another interesting concept. Look at this. So now you're in a global crisis, and these are thoughts that he's putting in, and they're taken out of the interview or whatnot. But this is an important place to start. As we're looking at this dynamic of all the turmoil, the tension, the politics, the economics of it. Who's going to be on top now? Who's going to inject the cash? Who's going to control the initiative, the agenda? Who's going to control the narrative? So that's really, really critical. That we have to look at this and we have to understand this. And so as we're investing in this space, as we're interested in this space, when moon, Jerry, when moon, because CBDCs are talking about the when moon. They're talking about this initiative. Is it going to be a year from now? Is it 3 years from now? Is it 6 months from now? What are the central banks doing that are going to normalize digital currencies? And at what point do they go and create their own? Or do they build it on existing platform? Or do they back it up with an existing digital currency, let's say like Bitcoin? Let's say now you have to transact between central bank digital currencies because you know what? They're still individually created. There's not one global currency. It's not going to be one central bank currency. Each individual country in this narrative that are joining this conversation are going to want to create their own. You still need some form of a transactional currency or a transactional product in between the movement and the uh, yeah, I would say the movement, but the conversion is probably a better word. So obviously, if you're converting your currencies, you're exchanging your currencies. So if you're going from the Bank of England central bank digital currency to the Chinese central bank digital currency to the U.S. central bank's digital currency to a Fed dollar or whatever it might be, or how does that transact? Ripple has positioned themselves with the ODL, and having on-demand liquidity is critical still in this movement. Although they're all digital, they're still separate. They're still creating these walled gardens around their digital currency, and there needs to be a communication portal that will allow these currencies to flow from country to country. So very, very interesting. Now, this is interesting too, how they talk about this. And this is, why is it different? This is a great article. What's this guy's name? It's so short, such a short opinion piece, this guy, Anatole. But he really, just brought it together. Look at this. In just a few paragraphs taken from the article that he was reading, but brought out some really significant points. So, while we have, digital money in the banks and on credit cards, CBDCs will be different in that they'll reside on permission blockchains. So interesting, right? We'll have digital wallets. Who knows? Let's look at some other stuff. Let's go to China. What is this garbage? All right, let's look at China. Why the U.S. shouldn't let China dominate the digital currency race. This was a couple days ago. Now, this is real. China's rushing to the forefront. What are some of the things that we've seen with this major issue, with the full economic shutdown of the world, started in China. It all rolled out from China. The issues stemmed from China. The misinformation came out of China. But yet now that the world is in crisis mode, China, they're in recovery mode. They have no new cases. There's no issues on the ground in China. Business as usual in China. Factories are open in China. Economics are flowing in China. All of a sudden, they have all the products that they can export to all these other countries to save the rest of the world with their medical products. Very, very disingenuous, and there's a major issue with that. So we have to look at, why is that a major issue? Why should the U.S., from our perspective, not allow China to dominate the digital currency race? Easy question to ask on the top of a title. You don't even have to read the article, right? Why shouldn't they? Why do you guys think? Why do you guys think the U.S. shouldn't let China dominate the digital currency race? Throw some comments below. I'm sure you guys have a lot of amazing comments as to why a communist country shouldn't dominate the digital currency race. That is a critical component to this entire conversation. Why is it that China previously, it had been reported that they dominated the Bitcoin mining companies or Bitcoin mining organizations in the world, pulling Bitcoin out at a rate. Why were they doing that? Why was China doing that? Why was China allowing that to happen? A communist country that didn't have control supposedly over a currency. Why was China mining Bitcoin at a rapid rate, trying to accumulate as much as they could previously? Although they tried to outlaw it from individuals for a while, but you saw organizations still existing within China mining Bitcoin at a rapid rate. Think about that. So obviously, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it's pretty obvious. So So, this is it. What comes next? What a great question. What does come next? What comes next in recovery next week, 2 weeks? We can't go like this forever. 2 weeks maximum. The United States can't stay shut down past that period of time. Come the end of April, there's no way the United States can remain shut down. You cannot step on people's liberties for that length of time based on false modeling and based on incorrect information and based on incorrect medical science and fear mongering. You can't do it. It just can't exist. It can't continue. It can't continue here, and it can't continue anywhere else in the world. They can't keep squashing the economy. And while all this is happening, the insurance companies who bear a large responsibility for the bailouts of the companies at this point, because people have business insurance, but the insurance companies aren't paying up. They turn to the government. That's a major issue. The banks aren't paying up. The banks could put mortgages on hold for 2 months if they wanted to, and not collect any funding. A lot of people are not, there's not a lot of fund movement, yet the banks seem to be okay with collecting their payments on a regular interval. Those guys are getting fat and happy and collecting their money. Think about there's some twisted logic with all of this. Now you have the central banks that are talking about what comes next with the central bank digital currency. Is the central bank digital currency the economic elixir that is actually going to fix all of the issues? That's interesting, because we look at this article. I know I have a lot of other articles and I spoke so much on the other one. Let's try to fly through some of these because they're interesting. But 2008, right? Economic crisis. Bitcoin stemmed from the global meltdown because of the real estate crash and everything else that was going on at that period of time. We saw a rise of digital currency at that period of time. Obviously, this guy gets into a lot of other conversation. It's really the question that's really, really interesting. But now this is good. Look at this. The shift to programmable money. That's interesting too. We talked a bit about that. Be careful of the programmable money that tracks everything you do and can stop you potentially from doing things that you want to do. Think about a communist country in control, full control of your money that's managed through programming. What can they do? Scary thought. But China, first mover economies. Who's going to be the first one? There's going to be a major shift to these digital currencies. Obviously, supply chains, smart cities are important, electric grids, the ecosystem in general, the Internet of Things ecosystem, but everything. But here we have, allowing China to automate. Do we want them to automate? Do we want China to be in charge of the global economy and the narrative and pushing the narrative forward? I think no. So, look at this. And for non-Chinese businesses unwilling to accept a currency from a nation whose courts they don't trust, their own countries move towards programmable currencies to a low risk. Look at that. So yes, so we're starting to see that transition. They want to, China wants to be the first in. They're diametrically opposed to Western capitalism. They have a communist capitalism. They rule from the top. They dictate to corporations. They own a percentage. They don't allow companies to open without their permission. Too much control, too much emphasis, too much ease of nationalization of factories and production overnight, without an executive order, without a wartime act, nothing temporary. It could be permanent, it could be forever. You know what? We want your company. You don't have any rights to your company anymore. We're the communist leadership. You don't have any say in it. We're going to dictate how things work. We don't want an organization or a a country like this to have control. Doesn't make any sense. I think this is interesting. We were talking about this earlier. Just threw this in. Japan to fund firms to shift production out of China. China is going to be suffering economically no matter what anyone says. They are going to feel the pinch. They were already feeling it. Interesting, again, the timing of everything, the cover up of everything. Obviously, we don't need to get back into that. I think this is interesting. Things that are happening in Congress right now, or in the battle in government with the SEC, etc. Telegram's fight against the SEC will help push cryptocurrency legislation. Telegram is fighting the battle. They have an ongoing battle. $1.7 billion token offering that, because of what they're doing, could move them to the next level. Interesting. That's what the Blockchain Association is saying. Interesting. I think it's possible, very possible. But look at this Blockchain Association, a crypto industry advocacy group with members from Coinbase, Circle, Digital Currency Group, eToro, Anchorage, Kraken, Ripple, and others. Look at that. Ripple's in there. Yes, it is. You better believe it is. Coinbase is in there. Circle is in there. They're all continuously lobbying the SEC. Why are they lobbying the SEC? Because we need regulatory clarity in the US. Also, because eventually, maybe in the near future, we're starting to see central bank digital currencies. They're going to be rolling out. So when we ask Jerry, when moon, Quien Luna, when moon, when is that actually going to happen, Jerry? That's interesting. You know, that's really interesting. And is that the right word? Is Ken the right word? I just keep repeating what you said there. But wouldn't it be cuando Luna? Is that the right word? The right terminology? Isn't cuando when Ken is who? Isn't it? I don't know. Who's gonna moon first? Ken Luna primero. But so let's see. So this is interesting. All of these conversations, all this discussion, the thought process. It's all really really interesting. It really is. Oh, is the blue easier to see? I was trying to use yellow. Is it coming up as yellow? That's yellow. You can see the blue is better like that. No, no. How about green? How about red? I don't know. So there's so much going on over here. It really is interesting. So let's move on here. Let's look at the Bank of England. Look at all these. There's so many different news sites out there now, but CoinGeek. Bank of England asserts private digital currencies are viable. I like that. Look at that. Private digital currencies. Private digital currencies are viable as CBDCs. That's from the Central Bank of England. From the Bank of England. Look at this. Here we have the idea of state run is gaining traction. Yes, we know that. Now, especially as this issue is forcing changes on how money is viewed on a global scale. So we're starting to see some major issues. Here we go. We see the Bank of Settlements again. The International Bank of Settlements, or the Bank of International Settlements. That more governments are now getting involved in exploring the possibility. Now, are they now getting involved? Or had they been getting involved? They're just now getting involved in the serious part of the conversation. Before, they were just involved in the conversation. Now it's like, when are we going to do this? We don't have any choice. Look what they did with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was $20,000. That's what it was valued at. It was huge. Can we get rid of all these issues? Can we we'll just tell the people that if they touch fiat currency, if they touch viruses are transmitted on paper money. So we don't want them to touch paper money anymore. We're just going to burn that. We'll transact it. We'll transfer everybody over to their central bank digital currency. They're not going to know any better anyways. However, there's a lot of people that understand the dynamics here. So can they continue going through a financial structure that essentially they just shut down globally. They've shut down the entire global economy. They need a solution. A solution has to happen. Can they turn the switch back on? And what's going to happen when they do? I don't know if anybody knows, but we do know that China, China can't be the first. China can't be the dominant player. Not going to happen. Can't happen. But we know that Japan is diametrically opposed to the Chinese communism. There's not a lot of love between these two countries. Japan has been pushing forward aggressively with digital currency in general. France is willing to hold experiments. That means they're already doing it. Not that they're willing to, they've already done it. Now they're willing to do it seriously with actual rollout timelines in mind. Sweden has been examining it. Now they're just announcing it. So that's important. Even some lawmakers in the U.S. have begun. Some lawmakers, but not enough. So we have some lawmakers in the U.S. that have discussed the possibility of digital currency and regulatory clarity. Oh, I see it is coming up as black. Sorry about that, guys. I didn't realize that my yellow was actually coming up as black, and my green, I didn't even notice that that's not even coming up properly on the screen when I highlight. That's insane. I didn't realize that it wasn't highlighting. Let me see what that looks like. I'm all of a sudden looking at the screen. It's like black highlighter. I don't know what you guys are talking about, black highlighter. But now I realize. So sorry about that. There we go. I'll just have to do that from now on. I just can't leave the highlight going. So sorry about that. I'm glad that you put that up there. So really appreciate that. Nobody else has ever said anything, and I'm always highlighting stuff, and it's never come up. But so look, Bitcoin was never meant to be anonymous, although certain digital currency projects skipped over that section in their white paper. Still, for a country to adopt a digital currency as legitimate, anonymity will be prohibited as it goes against all financial transactions, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. The idea here, though, is that they're moving rapidly. They're not going to come out here and say, oh, they're testing digital money and that's one step closer. No, they've been testing digital money. They're just now announcing the fact that they're testing digital money, because now when they say, you know what, hey, we tested it, we thought it would take a year, we did it in a month, we're good, we're moving forward. It doesn't work that way. In the real world. They've been testing it. They're now announcing it, and they're publishing their papers. They're doing all that stuff. But look, the Bank of France is on the hunt for a central bank digital currency that can ease interbank settlements. Interesting, interbank settlements. So there's a lot of good technology out there. The question is, does a central bank create their own? Or did they build it on something existing? Did they build it on Ethereum? I don't know. Did they utilize R3 and the Cordova? Did they utilize Ripple for transaction? But did they build it on the Interledger? What did they use to develop and design their central bank digital currency? Or again, like I said, did they build it from scratch? That's a really interesting question about their control of it and their solution of it. But as we know, most governments don't really build much. They will outsource to other private organizations to build it for them. Interesting. So the idea here, though, is that they're outwardly discussing it. They're looking at the pros and cons. This is all over the place. Where we're seeing it again: England, Sweden, France, Italy, Spain, Japan, China, the U.S., the Marshall Islands have rolled it out, the Bahamas, Bermuda. We're seeing a lot of examples of what's happening with the digital currency, and it's critical right now. Now's the time to make this transaction, to make all of these things happen. Um, Interesting. It's just interesting timing. But everything that we talked about in the beginning, the political aspect of it, is critical for us to understand the economic aspect of it as it's all coming together. We have to be very astute with what's happening because they're utilizing fear mongering right now to distract from the real narrative, and you have to be very aware and cognizant of that fact. I think that's probably the most important part that you can take out of any of this, is that you have to be very astute with what they're doing and the techniques that they're utilizing. Now, one thing to leave you guys with here, then I'm going to turn back to the chat for a minute, and then we're going to move on. But this is interesting. Trump executive order calls for commercializing the solar system and mining the moon. Amazing. It's really just an amazing initiative if that's going to be the case. But that's really, really important because there's resources. You do need to commercialize it. You need to help have a partnership between the U.S. government and private industry, as we do with other governments around the world, to allow the moon and maybe Mars. So that could be really, really interesting to see what's there, what kind of resources there are there, and to see the privatization and private business kind of racing to see what can be done. I just thought that was kind of interesting to kind of lead off with that. Or so anyhow, let me see, what do we got here? Bam, and look how we come back. Show off the lemon tree, the last one in existence. Gotta make sure we protect that lemon tree. And I saw something I wanted to get back to here. When Mullet, and again, appreciate that pointing that out, that that highlighter thing isn't working. James Ryan, well said. The U.S., Canada, etc. can't shut down past 2 more weeks max. Yes, you can't step on people's liberties for that length of time. Look at Sweden, no mandatory quarantine there. Exactly. And you look at those statistics, there's no facts or evidence on the ground that a country that quarantined or didn't quarantine, whatever, that one's worse than the other, except for some specific epicenters. And even then, it's interesting. It's really interesting. So let's see. There was something else I wanted to address that came up here. I like that. Boom. Chip. There you go. Where was it? It went by so fast. There you go. Yep. There's what I was looking for. Like China. Yeah, boom. They announced looking at CBDCs when they've been working on it for years. There you go. I saw that fly by, and I definitely wanted to make sure I got that. So, awesome. This has been outstanding. Absolutely an outstanding chat. So, let's see here. Important to understand, in the U.S., prepare for second and third waves of increase of case. The U.S. is most unhealthy nation on the planet. It's susceptible, true, unhealthy, eating the right foods, etc. But there's a lot more to that. So Binance purchase, CoinMarketCap, what change will you think we will see on the platform? That's an interesting question there to analyze. I think we should address that in the conversation. Let's Chip, let's talk about this on the roundtable. Let's take Texas XRP's question here and talk about this on the roundtable. I don't know if you can grab that. Chip, do you mind copying and pasting this somewhere so we can talk about this? We're going to be recording the roundtable, and this is a really interesting topic to address for Texas XRP. So let's do that. Chip, yeah, grab that. That's the last statement on the chat. Binance purchase, CoinMarketCap, what changes will you think we'll see? We'll talk about that so we can have that tomorrow night on the roundtable, 8 p.m. Sunday night, roundtable. Be there. Chip, look 2 up above your question. Texas XRP says question. If you could grab that, that would be awesome. It just look above Mark, you see Texas XRP, you'll see it. But anyhow, really appreciate all you guys for joining us this morning. Was absolutely outstanding. And as always, make sure you go to the description below, check out the other channels, check out the website, go to onthechain.io, go check out Jerry Hall's one-on-one. He's doing some amazing videos. Jerry Hall's actually been talking about doing a live stream, so we might be getting Jerry on a live stream Monday nights. So we'll see how that works out, Jerry. Live streaming Monday nights with Jerry Hall. And he's also doing a daily update, which is outstanding. And then we've got the other show that just started called The Prophet with Nick Black, and that is just a killer. That's awesome. Love that show. And we got so much going on. And then we did the deep dive. There's so much more to come, you guys. Stay tuned. We're going to be rolling out a newsletter. I just want to keep hyping up a few things, but the newsletter is critical because there'll be exclusive video content on that newsletter. And guess what? No cost. So we're going to be putting that in there, and that's going to be really important. So with that, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Give some thumbs up. Let's see you Sunday night on the roundtable. We'll check you out then. See you later, Peter. Good having you on. Wen Mullet, thank you. And we'll see everybody. Check you out later. I'm out of here.